Welcome to the project. In this project, we are going to set up a web application stack. The name of the project is vProfile Project Setup Local. Let's understand about this project. In this project, we will be setting a multi-tier web application stack. The setup will be locally on your laptop or on your desktop. There are two reasons why we are doing this project. The first reason is this project is going to set up a baseline for our upcoming projects. We're going to do a lot of projects, like we're going to deploy our stack on AWS, we're going to refactor it, we're going to containerize our applications, we're going to deploy the projects on Kubernetes cluster, and many more things. To do all the upcoming projects, you need to understand vProfile project first, and for that we are doing a setup on our local machine. The second reason of doing this project is so you can set up your own lab locally. If you have any project, you're working in any project, you can set up that entire stack locally and do all your R&D. Let's take a scenario from your real-time experience. Let's say you're working in a project, and in your project you have varieties of services that you deal with. You may be having services like database services, MySQL, PostgreSQL, web services, Apache, Nginx, application services, maybe like Tomcat, JBoss, Glassfish, or any other stack like that. And you may also have a runbook or a setup document to set up your project stack. Let's talk about some problems. You may not be comfortable in making changes in the real servers. You have the setup document, you have the runbook, but still we lack in confidence in making changes in the real systems. So you would like to set up a local stack. You would like to set up all that stack on your local machine, probably by using virtual machines. So you can do that, but the local setup is complex, it's time consuming, and it's not repeatable. So we would love to set up the stack locally by using virtual machines, so we can do R&D and gain some confidence on our project. But since the setup of multiple services is complex, it's time consuming, and moreover we can't do it again and again, it's not repeatable if we do it manually, so we avoid this setup. So solutions to our problem: what we can do is we can have a local setup, yes, but it would be automated, it would be repeatable, because we're going to have infrastructure as a code. So if we have a code to set up the entire stack locally, we can do it as many as time, it's gonna be repeatable, it's completely automated process, so you can do as much as R&D you want on your local machine. Alright, now let's see what are the tools that we'll need to set up this stack. So starting with, we will need a hypervisor, Oracle VM VirtualBox we are going to use, on which we are going to set up virtual machine. But since this is going to be automated, so for automation we are going to use Vagrant, and we need to execute some commands, not some, many commands. So we'll be using a command line tool, git bash, which will be multi-purpose for executing commands and also for version control. We can also use an IDE, so you can use Sublime Text, or if you have any preference of using Notepad++, Visual Studio, or anything else, that also you can use. You must have installed all these tools already from the prerequisites video. Let's understand the objective of this once again. We're going to learn VM automation locally. This project is going to set up a baseline for upcoming projects, And we will also learn how to set up many real world projects on our local machine automatically, so we can do as much as R&D we want. Now we'll see the architectural design of various services in our project. We have Nginx, Tomcat, RabbitMQ, Memcached, and MySQL service. So we'll see the architectural design. We'll also see one more architectural design of our automated setup. We will have a Vagrant, VirtualBox, Git Bash, and also some scripts and commands. Okay, long story short, we will be setting up a website, a web application, and this web app is a social networking site written by developers in Java language. Now we will understand the flow of this entire stack. The word stack is used for a collection of services working together to create an experience. In this case, a web app or a social networking app. So we need to set up all these services in our virtual machines and configure together so user get that experience of a web application. Okay, so the user opens the browser or the app. In the browser, the user will enter the URL. But in this project, we don't have a URL, we have an IP address. In the next project, we'll see how to set up a URL. But now we will open a browser, or the user will open the browser, enter the IP address. This is the IP address of a load balancer. And we are going to use Nginx service to create the load balancing experience. Nginx is a web service just like Apache HTTPD, and it's very commonly used to create the load balancing experience. So in one of our VM, we will be having Nginx service, and we'll configure it in a way as soon as the request comes, it is going to route the request to the Tomcat server or Apache Tomcat service. Apache Tomcat is a Java web application service. Once again, Java web application service. Pause the video and let that sink in. So if you have a web application written in Java, Tomcat is a very famous service to host it. So the application which is written by the developer will be sitting here. And if your application needs an external storage, you can use NFS service. If you have never heard of NFS, I recommend you do a little research. We will be talking about this again in AWS, but understand what is a shared storage for now. If you have cluster of servers and if you need a centralized storage, you can store it in NFS. Very commonly used. Okay, coming back to our application. So our application will be living here. The user will get a web page. The user will log in. The login detail will be stored in MySQL database service, and we'll come to that. Now here there is also one more service called RabbitMQ connected to Tomcat. And in our project, this is really dummy. It's not functional. The reason I included this is to create little more complexity so you can practice more. In future, we may be adding few more services like this, which may be functional, may be dummy. RabbitMQ is a message broker, or also called as queuing agent. To connect two applications together, you can stream the data from this. You don't need to dig in much about this as a DevOps engineer, but you should know there is such service. Message broker or message queue or queuing agent. Okay, coming back to our application once again. So our application, which is running in Tomcat, accessed by the users. And the user will log in with username and password. When that happens, our application will run an SQL query to access the user information stored in MySQL database. But before it goes to the MySQL database, the request will go to Memcache service. Memcache is a database caching. It will be connected with the MySQL server. MySQL server will store the user information. When the first time the request comes to the database MySQL, It will be sent from the MySQL server to the Tomcat, and then it will be cached to the Memcache server. So next time a request comes, the same request comes, it will be accessing the data which is cached in Memcache service. Just like you have browser cache, we also have database caching. Memcached is a very famous database caching service. Okay, so here's the entire stack. Pause your screen, take a look once again, rewind the video if you need to understand all these services. Also, do your own research. It is very important for a DevOps engineer to understand the flow of the stack. So whenever any issue comes, we can understand where it is originating from. Like if the user is not able to log in, the web page is coming, user is not able to log in, probably it is the database service not connected to the application. Or if the web page is not showing properly, it's the Tomcat. Now we cannot dig into each and every service and understand it in detail, because as a DevOps, we are more involved into the implementation rather than the functionality. But yes, you should know the functionality. So if you feel you need to know more about a service, you can do your own research. But we will be using these services many times in the course, in AWS, in Docker, in Kubernetes, in Jenkins, Ansible. So by the end of the course, you'll have a very good hand on all these services. Let's look at it one more architecture of how to implement it. Another design we have is for our automation stack. We will be using a Vagrant to automatically set up our virtual machine. So Vagrant is going to communicate with Oracle VM VirtualBox, which is the hypervisor, and create automatically virtual machines on that. Then we'll be using some bash scripts or bash commands to set up our services: Nginx, Apache Tomcat, Memcached, RabbitMQ, MySQL. So we will automatically create virtual machines from Vagrant, virtual machine for Nginx, Apache Tomcat, Memcache, RabbitMQ, and MySQL. Okay, finally, let's understand the flow of execution. First, we are going to set up all our tools from the prerequisite videos. If you have all this set up already, then you can clone the source code, which will be seen in the project. We're going to cd into a Vagrant directory in the source code. There will be a Vagrant file. We'll bring up our VMs automatically from that Vagrant file. We'll validate all our virtual machines if they're up and running and able to interact with each other. Then we're going to start setting up all our services one by one. First MySQL, then Memcached, then RabbitMQ, then Tomcat, and finally Nginx. And of course, we're going to build our application, our Java application, and deploy it. Then we're going to finally verify all this from our browser. Open your browser and access our source code URL. Switch to branch local setup. In this branch, you will have a directory Vagrant. We have 4 folders here. We are doing manual provisioning, so we'll be using manual provisioning. But if you have a Mac OS M1 or M2, then go manual provisioning Mac OS M1 directory. I have Windows here, so I'm going to click here on manual provisioning. And also for Mac OS with Intel chip, use this manual provisioning directory. We have a Vagrant file and a PDF. This document will show you how you can set up this entire project step by step. You can use it as a reference. And also we have a Vagrant file here, of course, which is going to launch all our virtual machines automatically. So we will clone this source code on our local machine and we'll get started. So I'm going to copy the URL, open my git bash. I'm going to get into F drive. You can select any place, any directory in your system, get into that. If you're using Mac OS, if you're MacBook, then you can open your terminal You should have Git already installed. And I'm going to run the command git clone and paste the URL. This is going to clone the entire source code in my local machine. Okay, now I should see vProfile project directory. That's my repository. I cd into that. Let's clear the screen. I'm going to switch to branch local -setup. And I see the Vagrant directory there. Let's get into that. Okay, ls. And you see here the 4 folders. Based on your operating system, get into the right folder. I'm getting into manual provisioning. If you have a macOS M1, M2, then just say underscore and macOS M1, get into that. For a Windows and macOS with Intel chip, get into the manual provisioning directory. Let me expand it, clear the screen. And we have the Vagrant file over here. Let's see this Vagrant file from Sublime Text Editor. Okay, open my Sublime Text Editor and I'm going to open folder where I have cloned my source code. So yes, it's in F drive. That's the repository. And we'll say select folder. Let's expand this. So we have Vagrant directory, manual provisioning, and the Vagrant file there. Let's understand this Vagrant file first. Well, Vagrant will use this file to launch 5 virtual machines. One will be Nginx, one Tomcat, one RabbitMQ, one is Memcache, and the other one is the DB machine. We have few global settings here. Config host manager enabled true. So if you install the plugin, then this setting will automatically update host name in each and every virtual machines. So in every virtual machine in etc host file, the host and IP addresses will be mapped. Nginx virtual machine we have given name web01, and it is going to be based on Ubuntu operating system. That's the host name web01, and it has a private IP. You can keep the same IP if it does not conflict with your existing network, or else you can change the IP. Tomcat virtual machine name is app01, and we are going to use CentOS 7 operating system here. IP address in the same network, and we are also going to give it an extra boost of RAM, 1 GB of RAM. Next is RabbitMQ, RMQ01. This will be also based on CentOS 7 operating system and an IP address. Next, Memcache, name MC01, based on again CentOS 7 and an IP address. MySQL, name is DB01, CentOS 7 operating system, and again IP address. If you see, all these IP address are in the same network, and then they would be able to communicate also with each other. If you want to make any changes like host name or IP addressing scheme, and save this file, make the changes and save the file. Okay, now let's bring up the stack. Let's open our git bash. You should be in this directory where you have the Vagrant file. You can check it once again, cat Vagrant file. Before you bring up the virtual machine, you have to install this plugin necessarily. Otherwise, you will get host manager unknown configuration error. What this settings will do is, this will automatically add host entries, map it with their IP addresses of all the VMs in every virtual machine. The second plugin is optional. If you are getting VBoxFS error, then only install the second plugin. But first plugin we need to install, so let's copy that and let's install this plugin. The plugin is installed. We're going to run the command vagrant up, which will bring up all this virtual machine. So we already have Oracle VM VirtualBox installed. There's no virtual machine over here now, but in some time you will see all the virtual machine up over here. This is going to take some time and I'm going to pause my video. Alright, all the VMs are up. First we have Web01, that is 1 GB of RAM. Then we have App01, 1 GB of RAM again. So total 2 GB now. RabbitMQ 512 MB, that's fine. Memcache 512 MB, so now total 3 GB. And then finally DB01 also 512 MB. So you will need almost 2.5 to 3 GB of RAM to set up this stack. Okay, stack is set up, the VMs are set up. Let's make a test, let's validate. Vagrant SSH Web01 first. Okay, we are in. Let's check the etc host file. So this gets automatically updated as I told you. And let's see if we are able to ping app01. Yes. Let's log out from here. Let's log into app01. Okay, let's check etc host file in app01. That's also updated. Let's ping the backend services which this machine will try to connect. MC01, RMQ01, and of course the DB01. Okay, this is important to validate because our Nginx is going to connect to our application server, and application server Tomcat is going to connect to DB, MC, and RabbitMQ. Okay, so we need to make this test. Now let's log out from here. Okay, now you can open the setup document. And you can follow the setup document. So we have already done our prerequisites. Our VM are already set up, did Vagrant up, all the VMs are up, and we validated everything. Now it's time for provisioning. All these services we are going to provision, but we are going to provision it in this order. First MySQL, then Memcache, then RabbitMQ, then Tomcat, and then Nginx, and then finally we'll deploy our application. Okay, so let's first set up MySQL. So let's log into DB01 where we'll be setting up MySQL service. So first we are going to set up all the services manually so we understand it very well, and next we are going to use bash scripts to set up all those things automatically. Okay, switch to root user and run yum update -y. So we update to all the latest packages. This is always a good practice. When you provision an operating system first time, you patch with the latest packages, with the latest updates. So if there is any vulnerability, any bug in the older packages, that gets updated. And we're going to do this on all the virtual machines. And this is going to take some time, a lot of time actually, and I'm going to pause my video for that much time. Okay, update is done, and now I'm going to set up a variable for database. This variable is, we are going to use this variable to set up password, and we're going to execute a lot of SQL commands, and we're going to use this variable to access the password. But this is temporary, so you can even echo this, right? But as this is temporary, if you log out and log in, this will be lost. So if you want to make this permanent, you can put that into etc profile file. Let's copy that. Let's save it. And let's source etc profile. So that variable becomes permanent. Okay, now I'm going to install a repository, set up a repository, epl-release repository. So you install this package, which is going to set that repository access. Next, we are going to install our packages. We'll need Git and of course MariaDB-server, which will be our MySQL package. Okay, MariaDB package is installed. Let's start the service. Systemctl start MariaDB. We'll also make sure it's enabled, so when we reboot, this comes up automatically. Let's check its status. It's active. Okay, now we will run MySQL secure installation script, this command. So it will ask for the current root password. Just hit enter. Set root password, yes, and set the same password as you have set in the variable. Remove anonymous user access, yes. Disallow root login, this I will keep no for now. Remove test databases, yes. Reload privileges, yes. Okay, so MySQL root password is set up. We can test the login. MySQL-u root-p. Enter the password and we're able to log in. Okay, let's exit. Now we'll clone our source code over here. And that's the reason why we installed Git. Okay, so we cloned the source code. The reason why we cloned the source code is because we have a SQL file with the SQL queries in a resources directory. That's the path. DB backup SQL file. And we're going to initialize our database with this. But first, we'll set up our database. Create the database. So that's the password variable over there, and this command is going to set up database named accounts. Next, we are going to add a user in MySQL named admin. Admin user in the database can be accessed from app01 and it will have full privilege on accounts database that we just created. Okay, now we will run our DB backup SQL file. So I can run it from here, or we can just be in the project directory, the repository, and I'm going to run the command to execute this SQL query on accounts database. So I need to give the path src main resources db backup SQL file. Okay, so it's going to log into the database. On accounts database, it's going to execute all these SQL queries. Okay, finally, flush privilege. Now let's log into the database and do a quick verification. Show databases. So you see the database named accounts. You can switch to that database and run show tables command. So the SQL query has initialized our database with these tables and we're good. Let's log out from here. If you're using firewall in CentOS, which is firewall D, then I have also mentioned steps to set a firewall rule for MySQL port 3306. So check in the document, you have commands to set up the firewall rules as well. Okay, so DB setup, let's set up now memcache service. Okay, so let's log out from DB and log into MC01. Switch to root user and first run yum update -y to patch this. Okay, all the patching is done. Let's clear the screen. Let's install EPL-release package. And now we will install, let me clear the screen first. And let's install memcached. And that's the only package we need to install over here. Okay, package is installed. Let's start the service. And also enable the service. Let's check its status. It's active. We have to run one more command for memcache so it can listen on TCP port 11211 and UDP port this. So anyways, we're going to access it on TCP port. So run this command and we are good to go. We can validate if it's running on the right port, which is 11211, and we see memcache service. We can see the PID, it's open on port 11211. Okay, memcache is set up. Let's log out from here and let's go to the next service, which is RabbitMQ, RMQ01. Log into it. Okay, we are in. Let's become the root user and let's run yum update -y. All the package update completed. Now let's see the installation steps. First, we need to install some dependencies. One of them is Erlang and Socat. Installing Erlang won't be direct. We have to download this RPM with wget command. Install this RPM. This RPM will set us Erlang repository. So we can install Erlang with yum install command. Once we have Erlang and Socat installed, then we are going to download a shell script, and at the same time we execute the script. Once the script is executed, it will set us repository to install RabbitMQ server packages. Then with yum install command, we can install RabbitMQ server package. Then we start and enable the RabbitMQ service and some configurations to do after that. So let's get started with this. Let's install wget. Let's clear the screen and go to temp directory. Download this RPM. Let's install it. And now we should be able to install Erlang. And that's completed. Let's now install RabbitMQ server. Now with this command, we are going to download this script and pipe it with bash so it will also execute the script. Okay, so as this says, the repository is set up. Now let's install RabbitMQ server. And finally, it's installed. Let's start the service. Enable the service and let's check its status. RabbitMQ service is active now. We have some configuration changes with RabbitMQ. So this command is basically gonna echo this output into this file. And we also have to create user in RabbitMQ. So that's the command, RabbitMQ add user. That's the username and that's the password. You can change if you want, but then remember whatever username and password you use, because same we are going to give in the configuration file. Next, we are going to give this user administrator privilege. In RabbitMQ, we do it like this. RabbitMQ set user tag, the username and the tag that we are setting up. Okay, after making this configuration change, it's time to bounce the RabbitMQ service. So we'll just systemctl restart RabbitMQ server. If everything is good, if our configuration changes are good, our RabbitMQ service should be running, or else you can see some error down there. Okay, till here the backend is set up. DB, Memcache and RabbitMQ. Now we'll log into our main hero app01, where we're going to set up a Tomcat service. So in app01, switch to root user. Can run yum update -y. Update completed. Now let's set up EPL release repository. Okay, that is done. Now dependency for Tomcat, which is JDK version 1.8. That's the dependency for our vProfile application. So you also have a higher version of JDK now, but we have to go with 1.8 for our project. JDK is installed. Few more tools, Git, Maven and wget. Let's install these. Okay, these tools are also installed. Now we'll download Tomcat. So let's go to temp directory. We will download this specific tarball of Tomcat. Okay, we should have the tarball of Tomcat, and let's extract it. Okay, let's clear the screen. We should see the Tomcat directory. Okay, let's see the next step. So we have to add a user, and which will create the Tomcat home directory for us. Tomcat is the username and this will be the home directory. This is where we'll copy all the Tomcat binaries. So that command, and now you should have a user called Tomcat, and you should have this home directory usr local tomcat 8, and this is where we'll copy all our data. So cp-r Tomcat directory /star. So copy everything from there to usr local tomcat 8. Now just check once. You should see all these files in usr local tomcat 8 directory. Okay, next step is to give permission, ownership of Tomcat user and Tomcat group to all the content in this directory. So let's do ls-l, and you will see these are all owned by root user. So let's change that ownership. We will say chown tomcat.tomcat usr local tomcat 8, and we'll give the option -r. So recursively everything will be owned by Tomcat user and the group. So you should see Tomcat user ownership and the group ownership. All right, next step is to create this file, tomcat.service file, and we have this entry over there With help of this, we can use systemctl command to stop Tomcat service. So let's open that up with vim. So it's going to be a new file. Okay, I will be using just vi and copy all this content carefully and paste it here, being in insert mode. Let's do some lines spacing. Okay, so when we say systemctl start Tomcat, it is going to run this command. When we say systemctl stop Tomcat, it will run this command. So we don't need to manually run this command, and we can enable this service by using systemctl, so it comes at the boot time, which is very essential. Let's save and quit. Once you make any change to tomcat.service file, you have to say systemctl daemon reload. So any other kind of services files also, if you have in this directory, it will reload all the changes. And now you should be able to do systemctl enable Tomcat. So the service name is same as the file name, Tomcat. Oops, that's my mistake. Okay, and then you can say systemctl start Tomcat, and let's check its status now. And you should see it active running. If you see some problems over here like failed, make sure you check the content in usr local tomcat 8. Check the ownership of this directory, and also inside the content should have Tomcat ownership, and also verify the systemctl file if you have the right content or there are no syntax errors. So check all this, fix things, do systemctl daemon reload, and it should be working. So Tomcat service is up and running. Now we are going to build artifact from our source code and deploy to Tomcat server. So let me clear the screen. Okay, let's see. We set up memcache, RabbitMQ is done, Tomcat setup is done, and now code build and deploy. So we're going to clone the source code, we're going to build the source code by Maven, and then we're going to deploy our artifact to Tomcat web apps directory. So let's do this. Okay, I'm in the temp directory still, and I'm going to clone the source code over here. Git clone. Okay, source code is cloned. Let's get into the source code directory. Git status. So you should be in this branch, local setup branch. Now before we build our artifact, we are going to update the configuration file that will be used by our application to connect backend services, the database, memcache, and RabbitMQ service. And that file location is in the repository src main resources application.properties file. Open this file and make the required changes for a database, memcache, RabbitMQ. So let's make changes to MySQL. So we have created our VM and we have the hostname db01, and that's the same entry in etc host file, so we don't need to change this. We have created a user admin, so we'll keep the same user over here with password admin123. If you created the admin user with a different password, change those. Backend service mc01, we have the memcache service with the same name and running on the same port. We already validated that. RabbitMQ rmq01 port 5672, it runs on that port by default, and we created a user in RabbitMQ with test and the password as test. So we really don't need to make any change, but this is a very important file. Understand this file very well, because in further the other projects we have to keep making changes to these files. So if you're good with all the changes, save and quit this file and run the command mvn install from the repository, which is going to build our artifact. Okay, after some time, the command completed successfully and it says we have artifact at this location, ls. So we have a target directory. Let me clear the screen. Let's get into the target directory, and in this directory you have vprofile-v2.var. That's our artifact, and this we are going to deploy in Tomcat server. And we have built the artifact in a Tomcat server itself, so it's just gonna be a copy command. But first I'm going to remove the default application of Tomcat, and for that purpose first I'm going to shut down Tomcat service, systemctl stop Tomcat. Let's check its status if it's down. And now we will remove the default application, USR local Tomcat 8. You have web apps directory in this, and this you should have a root. If you have root and root.var both, you can just say root star, but there will be just root directory for now, so just remove that directory. That's the default application, it's gone. And we'll replace our artifact, our default application that we just deleted by our artifact. So we'll copy our artifact vprofile v2.var to USR local Tomcat 8 web apps with the name root.var. Make sure while you're copying you give that name. Let's copy that. Let's check whether it's copied or not. Okay, now we'll start the Tomcat service. So systemctl start Tomcat. Once you run this command, it should extract the root.var into a root directory. And now that our application becomes the default application for Tomcat. After that, wait for a few minutes. Our application takes little time to come up. Now, by the time our Tomcat application is coming up, we'll set up Nginx service or final service. So let's exit from here. And let's log into Web01. And this is where we are going to set up Nginx. Web01 is Ubuntu machine. All the other VMs were CentOS. Web01 is going to be Ubuntu. So as we run yum update, here we are going to run apt update and apt upgrade both. Apt upgrade -y, which will update all the packages. Alright, so upgrade completed successfully. Let's log in as the root user now. And we will install finally the Nginx service. Apt install Nginx. And we are going to create a configuration file which will be used to redirect request from Nginx to Tomcat server on port 8080. So our Nginx will basically act like a load balancer. So create the file at this location. Let me show you once again. That location with that name, Wipro app sites-available. This is where we create the configuration. And we create the file with the name Wipro app. And we are going to put this configuration. So front end, it's going to listen on port 80. If you access Nginx service on port 80, it's going to route the request to Wipro app server app 01 on port 8080. If you have multiple application server behind the scene, then you can just copy the settings multiple time and you can change the host name app 01, app 02 like that. But we just have one application server and we have given its name and the port number. Tomcat runs by default on port 8080. Okay, let's save this file. And we are going to remove a default application or default website of Nginx. The path is etc nginx sites-enabled default. And now we have to create a link, ln-s, link of our configuration file at this particular location. You can give it with the same name, webpro app. So this is going to enable our site. Once the configuration changes is done, restart Nginx service. And that was the final command of our stack setup.